So the path of the straight and narrow is what I'm gonna do a little rant on right now. Um, so like, if thine eye be single, ye body shall be full of light. It's a direct quote from scripture. And like a lot of people, I've never actually heard anybody really preaching it, to be honest. I've never heard a single person even bring it up or talk about it. And I think it's because they don't quite understand it. And like the way Christianity has been indoctrinated into the external world, um, they've been taught to deny anything esoteric because it's been ingrained into their philosophy or into the external profane church, um, that we need to hide away from anything like that because it's always going to be like some sort of heretic or something like that. Because the external world and the controllers that be do not want you to actually understand the word. They want you trapped in profanity. And like, thy shall not take thy Lord's name in vain. And what is that? Vain is vanity. And it's the external words, right? So like you'll have people like arguing over, oh, you call Jesus Jesus, I call him Yeshua. Like you're not saved or some bullshit, right? Or you get people that are like, God, oh, God's not his name, like, 'cause you can't even speak his profound name. Like the Jew, like the Israelis, right? Or the anybody that's Jewish, I guess you could say, would say, oh, you can't speak it because it's a secret. Like they don't want people to know it. And like the fallacy of the way the dualistic mind interprets that, the way the profane ideology interprets that is as Yahweh, right? Which just means like he who was and is and will be. But the truth is about that is that's not the name of God. Like to know something is to know how it is, to know its ways. Like you can know that, like you could ask for an apple, not knowing what an apple is, and someone could give you an onion, and you could eat that onion and say, "I don't like apples." Well, you could do the same thing with God. You can do the same thing with anything in profanity. So it keeps people trapped in these things, like where it's like, "Oh no, like Yahweh, or it's this name, or it's that name," but it's all fucking profanity. It's all profanity. And like the devil is in the details and God is in the profound. And that's the external or dualistic mind that we're all trapped in, the ego, is simply a misplaced will. We've taken our will, God given energy, and we've placed it into the external world or the beastly world. But the path of the straight and narrow is the internal road, of self understanding and discovery. Like God's people perish due to a lack of understanding. And so, like, we need to go out and we need to seek these things. And, like, the keys have been hidden in the esoteric world or these mystery schools, which the church or the so called or the profane church has been taught to um, like run away from and just like say it's evil, it's evil. Well, there's everything's God. God is creation, and there's nothing evil in our creation. And the number of man is 666. Like we are the beast, we are the error, and we are the ones that corrupt the natural order of God or the natural will of God. Like our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And that's saying like his will needs to be done on earth. But in order to know that will, we need to know ourselves in our true heart. Like as the Bible says, the Torah will be written upon our hearts. And it also says our hearts are liars. Well, both are true. And one is true if we are caught in the external world. If we're trained, our hearts are trained by the external world with a lack of understanding. Our hearts are liars. But if we reflect our hearts in truth, um, and judge ourselves and lighten our burden, we can then write the Torah upon our hearts, which is like the abstract symbolism or ways of God. Like, so like I can say like a sentence and I'm saying the name of God. Like I become the living word. And to do this isn't through seeking all the positive in life. It's through accepting the negative, which is the recompense or the antithesis to our external desires. And like in the problem is with attaching to and trying to bring things about in the external world, like we are not of this world, we are the light of this world. But trying to seek the light in the world, we become bound to dualism. So everything we seek externally then binds us to the equal and opposite or antithesis of our desires, right? So like I want to validate myself, like I see others and I'm envious of the way they are, and I see some guy with like a hot woman and a nice vehicle. I put myself through hell in order to obtain this vehicle and in order to obtain some woman, right? And I think, within my limited understanding, that this is going to bring me happiness. And it will, and happiness, but happiness is a half baked concept in itself. It's like riding a roller coaster. Like, so even if it was just a vehicle, I could go and put myself through hell in order to obtain this vehicle, and then I have to watch it wither away, or it starts getting rock chips or fucking dents in its door. And rather than accepting that I've put my emotions into something that's never going to pay me back, into the wrong things in life, into things not God. Um, and this is the duality of that. This is the recompense of my desires. I blame others. Like, oh, that asshole fucking dinged my door, that person scratched my car, or you know what I mean? And we deflect these concepts, or we deflect the consequences to our actions by blaming others, which is the philosophy of Satan, right? He's the deceiver, he's the liar, so we're believing lies. He's the blamer and like kind of like deflector, right? So we deflect our recompense and we give it on to others and we increase their turmoil. And even like the truth, okay, so just back to square one. So like let's say I go out and get that vehicle and I get this woman. Um, so I think I validated myself by achieving something that makes me feel superior to others, which is a false hierarchy, which is the mountains that are going to fall in Revelation. But either way, so I go out and obtain it and I get this woman, and then all of a sudden I'm doubting why she's with me. So like I think it's going to make me feel better, but it only makes me worse. It only makes me feel more insecure about myself. But now I've put myself through hell in order to obtain it. So just to sustain it, like I can't accept it makes it harder to accept that I've erred, that I've done something wrong. So I like I need to increase my delusion, or I need to seek more happiness in order to sustain this emotional fucking pendulum to stay one way. And like the more it wants to swing back, the more I reach the opposite way. So the narrow path to God is accepting those negative thoughts and negative feelings, and not in deflection, but in personal accountability, right? So just seeing that, like, if I treat someone like an asshole, I become an asshole. If they cut me off in traffic and I cut them off again, I then become them, right? And that's the hypocrisy of the external world, and like not realizing the antithesis of it. And the bigger picture is that we create these external hierarchies in our reality that are completely false, and they're essentially like the giants of old, right? We're creating these mountains that just chew people up and chew up energy and chew up life force and then fucking spit people out. These false pyramids that like they're like, God is a circle. If you were going to draw God, it would be a circle. You know what I mean? And like in heaven, there is no weak links. It's a circle, and everything feeds off of one another. And there's that just center point, which is God, and everything else, it works off of God and works around God. And there's no weak links, and everything's serving everything else. And it's the opposite of the external world when we don't know God. So like the church is just another hierarchy, another way to like give away our power to the external world to um, suit others in a way that like gives them exactly what we're looking for out of that hierarchy, right? So like you have somebody who's like say like rap, right? So you got someone like Drake who's like, I got that car that says fuck your life, you know what I mean? And it's really like it's ugly energy just from the basis, but everybody else always seeks to bring themselves up above one another. And so like in trying to just kind of grasp a little bit of that light, they go and buy the album. And what are they actually doing? Like they think like they're portraying a certain image as long as they can get somebody else to believe in that image. So like some chickie in the passenger seat that believes that song and thinks that he's superior to others. But what you're really doing is giving that power to live that life to a guy like Drake. Um, and we're just living in the shadow of it, like trying to kind of be like it, right? And it's all the corruption of the world is within seeking the external. So the path of the straight and narrow is finding humility in our error, in our like accepting the antithesis to the positive that we seek. So it's within the negative. And then we can bring a full understanding, and we can understand the roots of something or the inequity that causes us to go reach for that light. And we can end the desire, the external desire, by connecting the bad fruit of, like, say that plant to the roots of it, right? So the roots of it are the inequity. Like I am not as good as somebody else, therefore I need to participate in this in order to make myself better than somebody else. But to realize the folly of it, to realize that the taxes of, or the opposite side of the coin, right? And find humility in that and let it go, like let the pattern go. So we no longer serve these ideas that don't actually serve us; they serve somebody else, right? And because God is seemingly absent because God isn't a ruler per se. Like he has rules that cannot be broken, but he's not there telling you. Like he gives you free will to break it or to live in alignment with it. Alignment with it, right? So like one time, my boy he wanted like a mint, and it had aspartame in it, and I was like, okay, like, but dude, like, there's aspartame in this. It's a bacteria grown in vats, and that bacteria is strong enough to kill half your stomach enzymes. So you're gonna eat these treats. You're gonna be happy when you eat them, but what's gonna happen is it's gonna destroy half your stomach enzymes. And tonight, when you go eat food, you're not gonna be able to process that food. And then tomorrow, you're not gonna be as strong as you would have been, and you're not gonna be as strong as say I am. It's going to diminish your strength in the future. But like if you would like to eat the mints now, go ahead. And I gave him the mints. I gave him some education, and I gave him the mints. And he looked at me, thought about it for a second, and handed them back, right? And that is the way of God. Like where you're not trying to control one another, because try to control, right? So like I could have other options. I could not care, and I could just say yes. I could not know, and I could just say yes, and I could give him the mints, and he could eat them, and we live in ignorance, right? Or I could say no. That's final, because I don't have the words or the trust in his own judgment, right? So I don't have trust in my son's judgment. So I just tell him no. Like, no, you can't have them. There's aspartame in them. It's not good for you. Okay. But now what have I done? Right? So either choice. One, I've enabled my son to be ignorant. by enabling him, allowing him to partake in these things where like I just look at it as at face value, right? Like, oh no, it's good. There's no sugar, right? It's a treat with no sugar. It's good. It's good. Or I could say, no, it's bad. You can't have it. It's bad. No, I could make a rule. But if I make the rule, I become subject to him. So I need to try to control him and watch him because that inequity or that desire is still going to be in his heart without the understanding. So now, not only do I make him subject of me, but I become subject of him. So I have to watch and control, right? And he is going to have to either hide or subvert that control in order to obtain the desire. Where God's way, there is no future outcome. It's just like, here's the education, right? Here you go. Go ahead. There's no external rule. And that's the truth of God. So, like, the truth is about lawlessness and in the end times, which I think we're in right now, is the external laws that people give us, that governments give us, which are these false hierarchies, are lawless, essentially, because they lack all understanding. And they require and invite external control. And God's the one who's supposed to be in control or a ruler. And the more that we give up our own accountability and self-authority, the more we give it out to others and we become controlled. And that is the manifestation of the beast, right? So, like, instead of having a cow and who cuts my lawn by eating the grass, or a goat or whatever, and gives me milk, I go to the grocery store to get milk. And I have no control over what I get. It doesn't matter. I have no control over how it's made. I have no control over what's done to it, or what's wrong with the cows, or what's good with the cows, or anything. All I can do is just go buy it. And then that gives government control over that substance, right? As soon as there's something wrong with it. Whereas I could have control over my own food. And here's the funny thing is, like, when I don't live a life of personal sovereignty, internally and externally, I give up that power to somebody else, and then they can control it. And like COVID is a good example of the dangers of this, right? So like Prime Minister Trudeau trying to do the right thing, like he's not trying to hurt anybody, but he's trying to like save the economy and get himself out of this fucking predicament that the society's put him in, that he's put himself in, that we all contribute to, by forcing us to take a vaccine in order to get rid of this problem that we all have, that we all share, because we all share this system. And the fact that I don't live in sovereignty and I don't have my own goat or cow for milk, I am now subject to those rules. So if he says I can't go to a grocery store without a mask, I can't go to a fucking grocery store without a mask. And that's just the truth of it. I've put myself in a position where an external authority has control over my reality. And the truth is, where we're coming to in our reality is a crossroads where we're going to have to make that choice. Like, am I going to go live out in the forest, and live the way of God and live the way of nature, which we have no problems, essentially, to a life where my problems is somebody else's problem, and all our problems are going to come together. And the danger of this external hierarchy that's building is it's a culmination. So the beast is looking to create one single authority. And once it achieves that, the true Antichrist spirit can be in the world. But the reason why it hasn't come about yet, and like the United States could have gone to war and taken over other nations fairly easily, but the reason why it hasn't come about yet is because we haven't had the technology. We haven't had the technology to do it. And like for like right now, I can drive around in a vehicle and I can speed And I could not speed, I can run stop signs, and if there's no cop to catch me, there is no repercussions to that rule. But this system that we are getting into with the beast, the culmination of this system is the ability to control even that, to create an external hypocritical law, right? So, like, the government can kill, but we can't. Like, how does that make sense? So I pay money. I'm still the killer because I pay money to you. So that makes me a hypocrite, and it makes you a hypocrite because you think you have some sort of moral authority over me, which is just silly. It is the beast, essentially the beast. Um, where was I? So essentially, where we're coming within this hierarchy or within this beast system is to a one world order where they can actually enforce every single law that's imposed. So this system can become like God, and it can reach into every aspect of your life, in everybody's life, and enforce these laws. And that's the key difference to where we're at now and where we should be. So if you take and if you overlay that to like my story about with my son, right? This is the option of control, like a false duality of like chaos to control, which is both fake. And the true way of God is a non-control, free will, and then passing on understanding through true love, which is understanding. Um, and essentially, like, that's the difference. Yeah. And like, so like the further we get in external deflection and deception and living these lies, the closer we get to the culmination of this system. And it's not going to matter what what it looks like. It could actually represent, it could be Christianity personified to the word, laws to the word. But it's only going to be like the Dark Ages. And it's not going to be a pretty thing, and it's not going to be a good thing. It's going to be an ugly thing. And with that total control, they can then use fear because, like, the ego is easily controlled because everything it thinks, it believes, and relies upon and invests in is under threat of the external world, right? And like its lack of understanding gives it this ignorant opposition because like everything it understands is how it derives, the ego derives its its pleasure from or its positive from. So anytime you threaten a concept of mind that ego represents, you're threatening the very basis of its emotional sustenance. So you're threatening its life, essentially. And that's why people get so angry when you oppose their view or question their view. And that's like really the truth of the matter is right now, well, even that, okay, so like the question. You raise a question, it's almost like it's like the question is God, an aspect of God because it represents the negative. And like you bring it up, and that would be like Christ, and you bring it up to these Satans, these false archetypes or false minds, these false wills, and you put that question up to it, and it gets fucking angry at you, and you manifest the demon within it, which is quite funny to see, because all you're doing is asking, say, a question, or enlightening a little bit, or deepening their understanding, and they fucking hate you for it, because it threatens everything they've based everything on. So their entire life culmination of energy is based upon these thought patterns, and then you come about and threaten it. And when you threaten it, you trigger a fucking reaction. And that reaction is never good. But thank God for online, so I can like poke out these things without fucking getting a black eye. You know what I mean? Without getting a knife in my back. So the narrow way is that question. But it's questioning your own heart and mind and not the world. Because the world will always leave you with more questions. But the path within is about taking the statement and taking the question to it willingly. right? And like the question is feminine and the statement is masculine, and our entire society is built on that masculine principle. And that's why out front of like say like the Vatican, you have that phallus, that giant male phallus. Out front of Washington, you have that giant male phallus, which is like 666 inches wide at the base and like 6,666 meters tall. You know what I mean? And it's kind of funny to say, but like it represents the masculine, is what it represents. And it's a way to keep you in duality or keep you chasing these falsehoods, these false answers, with no real answers to those questions. Um, Except for these little false ones that are only really dividing and separating and putting a blindfold on the problem itself, but it never actually handles the problem, right? It's like prohibition. Prohibition created just like an underground society of things because of its external fucking control. So you enforce this external control because you have a lack of understanding, and in order to try to quell the problem, you put a mask on it. And now it just kind of fizzles out into the darkness, but it's still there. It's just creating a new system, a new hidden system of it, right? So looking at your own heart and taking these statements and questioning them, and like the statement is the feminine, and or the statement is the masculine, and the question is the feminine. And so you find a statement, you give it a question, you feel a certain way, you feel a negative, you bring the question to it, and you'll erode a layer of like say like an onion, and you'll have a new statement, and then it's going to bring about new anger or new upset or new agitation, and then you need to bring the question or that divine feminine into that statement until you find common sense or the immutable truth of God within your heart, um, which is immaculate understanding, or a what it feels like or what it felt like to me is contentment and humility. I found humility in my own hatred, and I pulled up the roots from this ugly plant, and I pulled the weed right out of my garden, essentially. And I found humility and tears in it, and I found a way where I can wish other people enlightenment rather than hatred. And I no longer have to be a hateful person, and I no longer have to suffer. And that's the end of suffering or taking away of your burden of Christ, which is writing the Torah upon your heart in understanding and alleviating a burden or a dualistic thought pattern that's false because we're only believing half of it. So we've accepted the negative in our own heart, and we bring a fullness or a fullness to the plant, so we understand the roots and the byproduct, and we can let go of that plant. And then we can know what is Satan and what is God, and we can replace it with the good word, right? So they know not what they do. They know not what they do. Man, you know? And maybe if I had the opportunity to tell them, it wouldn't be like, you motherfucker, or hitting them with high beams. Or I could just be like, hey, dude, like, man, your high beams fucking suck. Or even more than that, rather than trying to control somebody else, I could make sure my high beams were good, or whatever it is. But that is the path of the straight and narrow, is to write the Torah upon your own heart, and to make thine eye single, and filling thy body full of light, and that light is understanding. So, anyways, I don't know. This is just a rant. It had no real structure or anything like that. I'm just talking while I drive, and I hope you find some sort of something. I hope you find some something in what I said. And yeah, hopefully we all find enlightenment. All right, peace, y'all.